How do you know if someone's a Prusa user? Oh, don't worry, they'll tell you. I've been doing this channel for a couple of years now, and if there's anything you can be certain of beyond death and taxes, it's that on every FDM printer review I've done, someone will comment, "Get a Prusa." Okay then, I did. After agreeing with them to show off Prusa's new multicolour resin kit, I was straight back in there before that video even dropped and went live, asking them for their printers. I hear it all the time, so many amazing things about these, but when I looked on what's on offer, I just didn't get it. I was determined to see what the fuss was about, whilst at the same time unwilling to part with over $1,000 just to try out an FDM printer. But thankfully, Prusa agreed to send me their latest machine, the MK4S, and I'm coming into this review with one key question in mind. How is this possibly worth the price they're asking? Hi, I'm Ross, and this is Fohammer Videos. Okay, first off, now that I've used it, I kinda get it. There's a lot of little detailed things here to justify its price, and we'll cover that. But it's really going to be down to you, the viewer, to make a personal decision on whether this is a product you want to invest in, because it is an investment. If you, like me, have never seen a Prusa machine before, but know of the die-hard reputation, well, if I do my job right as we walk through the machine, it should steadily become clear. This one proves why I hate comparing printers on specs alone, and it often comes down to me sharing more about its user experience coupled with the brand's approach, because the value of any product, especially an expensive product like a 3D printer, the true value often comes from far more than just what can be written on paper. And when buying a 3D printer, what would you rather make, a purchase or an investment? Now, I actually shared a short on this printer when I used it to 3D print a Mayan death whistle and outright asked people, why? Why is this worth the price they're asking? And I got some good responses. First though, let's talk about what this printer is. It's a bed slinger with a build volume of 250 by 210 and 220 millimeters. And like, that's literally it. If I were to break this down the way I typically would, I'd talk about the style. Now, in fairness, I personally love the colorway because, as I've said in many a review where it's relevant, black and orange are the colors I chose for my branding, and that's not designed in any intelligent marketing way to attract people. I just like the colors. But when I look closer at this machine and compare it in the way that I would talk about the components of any other printer, it's everything I've been sour on before. In fact, this one's kinda worse. But hang on, Prusa fans, don't go throwing hateful comments just yet. Let's go through the whole journey because things change. What I mean by sour on its style is that not only is this a bed slinger where much of the mechanical and electrical parts are exposed rather than being tidily housed in a protective chassis, and some of the framework is just generic V-slot aluminium extrusion rails, but also many of the components are actually 3D printed parts, which makes the whole machine look incredibly DIY. Or another way to put it is, it looks kinda cheap. It was only when looking over my initial critical notes for my script, and then comparing them to the comments on the short, where I started to ask myself, is there another angle to this? Am I missing something in all of the complaints I've written? Because the last thing I want to do is put out a video upsetting the whole Prusa user community without first properly considering if there's an appropriate counterpoint. And so I did that for every critique that I'd initially made. And it was with these 3D printed parts where it first clicked. Now, I've only ever seen very few 3D printed parts on machines I've tested in the past, and typically where I've seen them before, it's always been because I've had a prototype printer and those pieces aren't final yet. But these aren't prototype machines, they're incredibly well-respected high-quality printers. So I had to consider, what must it mean for a company to have the tenacity to put out a 3D printer made with 3D printed parts? From one perspective, it means they've got a hell of a backbone. I mean, it surely takes a lot of nerve for them to say they are so confident that their 3D printers produce such high quality prints that they show it in every single printer they sell, because the parts for these printers are printed on Prusas. So that's another way to look at it, I guess. And whilst I have been able to kind of see the counter on this point, I still haven't quite drunk the orange and black Kool-Aid just yet, because whilst I do personally love the colour, as I said, it still does look kind of cheap. But then I've got to counter again and also be fair and say, who really buys a printer for its looks? I've been doing quite a bit of careful back and forth with this one. You see, as I said before, for all intents and purposes, features wise, this is just a 210mm bed slinger, which is ever so slightly on the smaller side of what I'm used to. Yeah, go on, convert that to inches and put your joke in the comments. But it is, on the outset, just a bed slinger. There's no time-lapse or monitoring camera, there's no automatic extrusion calibration features, and there's no multi-material unit as standard. In fact, if you want that feature, it'll cost me another €400 before shipping prices are added on. And whilst I, personally, that I have to keep specifying now because it's fine if you want something different, I personally like the idea of this feature, I don't like it enough to spend this much on it. From the videos I've watched, it takes up a lot of space and swapping reels can sometimes be awkward, which unfortunately negates what I feel is the primary value of such a unit. Now I'm jumping around in this video a bit, probably worse than Tarantino, but stick with me because I want to go back to the beginning and talk about something I do like, in fact, something I love. The unboxing and setup experience here was second to none. Not only is this well presented, and I don't just mean look how appealing the packaging is to sell more printers kind of thing, but the careful and precise layout of elements on the packaging immediately says professional tech product. Then there's the tape. The box was so precisely taped closed, it was almost symmetrical. And I know, you'll think I'm mad for talking about the tape on a box when reviewing a printer, but one, first impressions matter, and showing enough care to package your printer accurately is another small step to communicate your company's goal of delivering precision. And two, yeah, I'm really clutching at straws to find more value in this printer. There is a lot more actual value to talk about, but I'm sure many of you, like me, are already scratching your head in wonderment over the price. So let's move on. When it came to setup, this printer was literally take it out of the box and plug it in. Now, there are two versions of this printer. The assembled version, which I got, but there's also a kit version, which is €260 cheaper. Now, whilst I personally think I would have got a lot out of the learning experience of building a printer from a kit, I'd have put any follow-up printing issues down to my own inexperience in doing this. I'd be constantly wondering if I'd built it correctly, and whilst I could learn a lot more in putting problems right, I know that, once again, personally, it could have easily just soured me on the whole machine and not given me the incredible experience with it that I've actually had. And yeah, I'll come back to that shortly, but as a teaser, I have been super impressed with this little printer. After unboxing this, all I was meant to do was clip on the filament reel holder to the upper frame. Now, in my haste, I hadn't realised I needed to attach the 3D printed filament guide, which led to my first few prints causing reels to unspool themselves. But once I got this in place and screwed it in using the pack of fasteners you get with the printer, that was it. That was the whole setup. Pull it out of the box, plug it in, attach these, print. Now, controlling the machine is done with the pre-installed display, and from what I've learned, the MK4S swaps out the original Mark IV's 3D printed bezel with this injection molded plastic case. Whilst most printers are now primarily touchscreen driven, this has both a touchscreen and a control dial, which is a bit of a throwback to monochrome printers from the past. The actual controls are fairly straightforward throughout. Everything is very well translated, though, much like the device, things are generally more laid out to be expecting a more technical user. Prusa is kind of stuck in providing hierarchical rows of settings and values as selectable options, so they're compatible with this dial, rather than having a series of pictograms with intuitively placed buttons. It's not so much a bad thing, not at all. I'm really just pointing out a modern difference, and there are certainly some out there who will prefer this type of layout. And I do get a kick out of the cute caricature of Joseph Prusa, who pops up during the out-of-box experience with handy hints. This is the evolution of Microsoft Clippy that I never realised I always wanted. And this OOBE helps you set up the machine for your first print, and even helps you connect to the Prusa cloud so you can use the new app to monitor print progress along with remotely accessing the printer in the desktop slicer. Now, I do find it odd that the way you transfer your Wi-Fi settings to the machine is via the app, but also via the NFC reader included as a feature with the 4S. But this requires you to have an NFC compatible phone, and also, I've no idea what else this took stepped out of the way NFC reader will actually do for the printer. Unless you can tell me I've missed something, and please do, this just seems like an odd component to add just to create a more convoluted way than most of getting your Wi-Fi credentials onto the machine. And I'm sure there's a way to do it if you don't have an NFC compatible phone, but I did, so I don't know how to now test the other way. On the right hand side of the display is the USB port for transferring files onto the device. The USB stick itself is pretty, and it's nice to see that when it's plugged in, the text on it is the right way up. Again, a tiny detail, but other brands just don't do this because they don't care enough to. Another quality addition I like is the QA test for this printer. With many machines, you get a signed generic piece of paper. This not only had a printout of all the tests that had been performed containing my board's serial number and MAC address, but my printer had already been used to print a Prusa logo, and this arrived still attached to the build plate. As someone who has their feet in resin printing and often sees brands claim they've pre-leveled your printer, only to find out it's often a much better idea to just do it yourself anyway to be sure, seeing that my printer had already performed a print which has passed Prusa's QA checks is quite admirable, and another thing that echoes Prusa's commitment to delivering truly high quality machines. Loading filament is fairly straightforward. Just select load or unload from your settings menu, or select change when you want to swap it. When loading, you only need to gently insert the end of the filament into the top of the hot end unit, and it'll automatically grab and feed through the nozzle. On removal, once heated and retracted, you just pop it out. My first print was an 8-minute benchy, and 8 minutes is almost half the time I've seen other fast printers report. And I've typically seen that the ways that other printers achieve this result is just in a poorer quality benchy. But here, the benchy itself looked incredible. Now when I removed it, I immediately saw the truth. The base and walls were so thin it actually broke coming off the build plate, and you can feel how flexible the walls are because they actually bend and flex in when you press them. But let's not sell it too short, because other printers had the opportunity to do this too if they could, and I think Prusa was able to do so super well here thanks to the new 360-degree fan on the hot end, and that's a component which surrounds about 270 degrees of the nozzle. But what this does is it really helps in filament cooling, which helps with bridging. There are numerous reviews online showing this printer is able to handle 75-degree overhangs pretty damn well, which means you can internally support a benchy with far less infill, and that saves a lot of time. And the accuracy of the external layers is so spot on that it's not needing several walls for structural strength. And this is where it comes to talking about the results I've had from this machine. They have been incredible. I genuinely haven't seen a printer so precise and accurate out of the box in every single printer I've tested. Every one. In my limited experience, everything people are saying about the accuracy and reliability from Prusa machines has been exhibited here. The base layers are perfect every time, the walls precise, and I'm yet to spot a single external seam. And I even moved away from the demo prints. I mean, I had to ask myself, are these results from the printer or incredibly good dialed in settings? Well, I intended to try a multicolour print by utilising a pause in printing and then swapping from the Galaxy Black to the super vibrant, almost fluorescent Prusa Orange, which it's just a gorgeous colour. But the orange they sent me is PETG, not PLA, so these two materials won't stick to each other, unfortunately. Now, I'm happy to buy some filament myself, or in this case Prusament, which can be seen as an awfully arrogant portmanteau in itself, though I expect this was intended to be cute. I went to buy some Prusa Orange PLA only to find it's €30 a reel, again, before shipping. So, no, I won't be trying that. Instead, I did throw in some cheap as I could find black Elegoo filament, which works out at $8.40 a reel when you buy them in boxes of 10, and I printed a Halloween pumpkin I found on Printables, and aside from one small shifted layer, which happened because I accidentally twatted my camera against the machine mid-print, this was flawless, and again, one of the best quality FDM prints I've ever seen. However, I want to come back to FDM print quality in my conclusion. Now, as I said, I had quite a few comments on my short as to say why these printers are worth the price. Reliability and accuracy was quoted often, and yeah, I can believe that. Their reputation alone is enough to cement that point, and I can understand why, having used this one for a couple of weeks. And many people have said they use some of the best, highest quality parts when making their machines, and I honestly couldn't tell one nozzle or gear from the next to verify this. But what I do like is that due to the way these come as kits, you can actually purchase any of the individual components that make it at a very reasonable cost before shipping. Then just look at the slicer, Prusa slicer. I've got so many printers where the brands just use rebadged versions of someone else's software. Here, Prusa slicer is what they created, which yes, is based on Slice 3R initially, but the difference is so significant that you can easily see that this company are a team of real innovative engineers and aren't just piggybacking on the success of others. They pretty much made this. This slicer is so good that it spawned Bamboo Slicer and then Orca Slicer after that, the latter of which is currently the most popular independent slicer out there. But at the same time, I actually find Orca far better than Prusa Slicer in many ways. It's got all the same settings, but thanks to the bamboo filter it went through, it has the more user-friendly workflow. Prusa Slicer, in reflection to this, is like the on-screen UI and the printer itself, a bit more techy, which some may hate and some may love, but we've still got to respect that it's still a slicer that they made for their machine and others, and they're constantly adding new features to it. Now, one comment that really piqued my interest was the upgradability. Say you'd bought a Prusa Mark III back in 2017, you could technically get upgrade kits to turn that into a Mark 3S, a Mark 3S Plus, a Mark 3.9, and a Mark IV among other variations, and now the Mark 4S. This is what suggested that a Prusa purchase was less of a one-off buy and more of an investment, assuming you want to stay on top of the latest features and functionality. But now, whilst the upgrade from the Mark IV to the Mark 4S is only €90 plus shipping, the jumps between the 3S Plus and the 3.9 or newer are closer to €500 plus shipping. So at that price, and considering you need the skill to do it, you may be better just holding back a few releases and getting a whole new printer kit. But if you want an investment to ensure you're on top of the latest Prusa offering, I've not seen another brand do this. Another thing that's very often said is that their customer support is top tier, and I know for many people out there who've had experience with these overseas help desks, the idea of good customer support carries a lot of weight. Now, unfortunately, I have no experience on this side, but I must say that my communication with Prusa has been some of the best I've had with any brand. It's just so much easier to have a more direct conversation with people than try to overcome a language barrier. But the thing that really deserves the most respect, in my opinion, and hits me right in the feelings, is Prusa's openness. They came into this market and carved out the chunk they wanted. They're known as one of the best brands. They are top tier in terms of their ethos. They charge a premium, but they deliver a premium too. And because they've worked in open source communities and they are fully open themselves, it seems that they're largely responsible for a lot of the technology that goes into modern 3D printing. And that commitment to remaining open in a challenging market is incredibly admirable. But when you look at things like even the slicer they created being taken by other brands, and with people like me salivating over them without giving Prusa the respect they deserved, I can completely understand why the long-term Prusa fans are upset. After all, I merely adopted 3D printing. Many of you were born in it. For Prusa, with the effort they've put in, the advancements they've made, and the quality they deliver, yes, Prusa deserves our support in return. They are a company we should all want to keep alive. But that's why it pains me to say that, yes, I love this machine and I really enjoy printing on it, and love the potential it has and love the print quality it delivers, which is exceptional. I can still get a reliable printer with more features and a more beginner-friendly oriented workflow at less than half the price, and whilst the print quality isn't on par out of the box, I'm printing knickknacks and cosplay props and trinkets for my house more than anything else, and the quality I get from my other machines is good enough for me. so I'm sorry, but I hope you can see I respect it. And since I'm a privileged YouTuber and I got mine for free, I'm not putting this in storage, and I'll 100% print on it first when I want single colour PLA or PETG prints that fit within this build area. But I can't in good conscience recommend it to anyone except the people who want exactly this experience and are happy to pay the price for it. And since I'm having the same argument lately in resin printing regarding the Hagears Ultracraft Reflex RS, I completely respect anybody who is willing to pay the money for this printer, this filament, and the shipping to get this experience. If you're after top quality and are a bit more techie minded, yeah, definitely pick one up. They are great. And I appreciate the growth of this whole i3 frame project, and I honestly think it would be best if Prusa had a sideline printer designed more to attract the masses. The one thing I am heavily excited for and looking forward to is the Prusa XL, so please keep an eye out for and watch that video from me when it comes out soon. I want to say thanks to everyone for watching, and thanks to our members who are on screen now. Please consider joining them to get your name up in lights, early access, exclusive videos, and member level Discord roles. Until next time, orange is the happiest colour. Fohammer out.